So welcome everyone. My name is Ignacio Fernandez. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for the Climate Registry. And the Climate Registry is an organization established by the government of the state of California, offering member organizations to have a clear, transparent registration of their emissions. We offer guidance for different sectors, in addition to organize different the states in California, the leadership of government and private institutions to attend COP and series of events that we do throughout the year, including the Climate Week New York. As such, I wanted to thank the panel, its distinguished members from all protocols and standards and registries throughout the world, and starting with our moderator, Rick Sainz, who is a member of the Board of Directors of Climate Registry. Thank you, everyone.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. I understand on the last panel they got a little wet because it started to drip down, and but Ignacio was telling me that the panel was so professional they didn't even skip a beat. So if it starts dripping on you, pressure's on. You need to stay focused on what you're saying, I guess. Thank you for this. This is, you know, at the Climate Registry, we're very focused on the role of high integrity reporting and the importance of just how do companies assess and measure their footprints, and then report that so that there can be, you know, decision useful information that a whole range of stakeholders can rely upon. And it's not just governments that need to rely on it. In fact, you know, maybe most importantly, it's not governments, but the markets and other things. So we really welcome this. And this has been a pretty important year. One of the themes that you hear often here at COP, leading into COP, and all the other fora that we travel around to attend, is this idea of harmonization in carbon disclosure. And I do want to touch upon harmonization as a concept, and then maybe do a little bit of unpacking exactly what does that mean and how do you actually achieve it in the real world at various levels. And so again, I want to thank the panelists. There's a lot of you on this panel from varying backgrounds, but you all have a lot of good insights and expertise to share with us. And so I'll start with sort of an opening question to everybody, and we just go down the line, really, and that is, in this context of harmonization, you know, what is your perspective on that, and then what are you working on in respect of harmonization of carbon disclosure principles, methodologies, et cetera?
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's definitely, as Rick was saying, a very important year, or a couple of years, for the environment and corporate reporting and standardization, harmonization. I work with the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute, and we work with building professional capacity with GHG professionals. So in harmonizing, the things that we've been doing for many, many years is teaching the fundamentals of greenhouse gas accounting and what that means to create credible and trustworthy reporting. So in the harmonization challenges and what we expect in the future ahead is to continue to have proper expertise in the rooms and the decision making, and joining the expert panels and the expert working groups of the revision process to increase the expert judgment, increase the bar of what we need as a baseline for proper climate action, which is the GHG inventory. So I really hope that with harmonization and proper standardization across the world, that we'll continue to see proper greenhouse gas accounting that will be the bedrock of climate mitigation.
Yeah, just pass it down.
Thank you. I'm Belinda Mathers. I'm from Toitu Envirocare in New Zealand. We're a certification program, so we work with about 800 businesses in New Zealand and UK, and a few here and there elsewhere around the world. We're quite excited about the harmonisation of greenhouse gas protocol and ISO standards. We have based our programs on the ISO standards. We're accredited by our local accreditation body. But yeah, there tends to be conversation about ISO or greenhouse gas protocol, and if once it's harmonised, that conversation goes away and we can just get on with it, get on with the measurement, get on with the getting our numbers together so that then we can think about climate impact and climate ambition.
Hi, thank you everybody. My name is Veronica Lizana. I am from Chile, the Santiago Climate Exchange. We are an organization to support the company and government in design of political, and we have that overview of the big company in Chile to look at the advanced reporting about the sustainability and financial business. So this is this carbon disclosure is for us very important that how the company is evolving in this issue about the radiography. It's an overview that changed came in the last 3 years. So in the next comments to this.
Great. Good afternoon. I'm Craig Hansen. It's weird to hear yourself in your thing. There you go. I'm Craig Hansen. I'm Managing Director of Programs at WRI. I'm also on the steering committee of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. To your question about, what's been happening and a big deal, I think this year's, one of you alluded to it, this year's announcement that the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and ISO are forming a partnership to streamline and align the standards as we move forward. And we can go in detail in later questions about how we're doing that. But to me, that's a big deal, and it's great to hear people on the panel already saying that's great that that's actually happening. So we're excited about it at WRI and at WBCSD, and we're hoping we'll hear in a second. Hoping ISO is happy about it as well.
Hello, can you hear okay? So I can certainly confirm that ISO is very excited about this partnership as well. It is a high priority right from, you saw the announcement come out from Sergio Mujica, our Secretary General, all the way down to the working groups. We just had our ISO Environmental Management Plenary in Toronto, which was the first time that the working groups of ISO and of GHG Protocol came together to actually hash out what does it mean to work together, how do we actually set up the technical committees and the interfaces and the communications and the experts that need to interface together. So it absolutely is amongst our highest priorities for harmonization. And I would just add that I think one of the things that made this possible was there was a confluence confluence of timing between the two organizations where both organizations were revising their standards. So there's lots of conversations that happen about harmonization, but I think also having that enabling environment where the governance cycles work appropriately, and this just worked out so beautifully for us to have the two organizations come together to say let's do this together and let's genuinely harmonize with the anticipation of co-branding.
That's great. Okay. I mean, everybody, it sounds great. I mean, harmonization is a wonderful word, and it's great. Craig, I want to go to you maybe for the first question. We have a lot of groups on this panel, but there are others that are important and influential for various stakeholders in the market. I'm thinking ISSB, ESRS. How do you see the GHG protocol, and maybe and you can both reflect on this, combining your work now to try to consolidate that. How do you see that aligning other disclosures that are going to start to feed in or leverage off of, or maybe have a different emphasis? Can you just describe where you see that going?
Sure. And we take that seriously in terms of making sure the whole ecosystem is aligned, and just procedurally ways we do that are, for instance, in the Independent Standards Board that we have for the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. We have a number of observing entities, and that's where ISSB is, EFRAG, et cetera, SBTI. So they see things as now they can't vote on a standard, but they can give perspectives and they observe, so they kind of see, how things are actually evolving. Likewise, in technical working groups too, we can have some of those entities participate in the technical working groups as we move forward. So we've baked that into the design process for those organizations, such that they know early on and they can start getting ready for how things are playing out.
Your thoughts, Zakia?
Yeah, I think it's a similar answer to what Craig said, in that we have the opportunity for the IFRS or for some of the other entities to also sit as liaisons on the development of the ISO standards. So that's a very open process for any organization that wants to be a liaison organization to participate and to be able to provide comments on the standards as they develop. And our experts are also obviously keeping on top of SBTI and the revision of other standards, so that knowledge is also brought into the ISO system. So there definitely is a consideration of and a prioritization on harmonization, and you see that even with the ISO Net Zero, what the guidelines that were released, that's now in the process of becoming an international standard, that there is consideration in reference to SBTI and that concept, or the SBTI regime, coming into target setting as well. So I think it certainly is factored into governance mechanisms, and I think, at least I like to think, that the GHGP and the ISO alignment, that it's also going to show that harmonization is possible, and that organizations can adjust their governance structures and can adjust their processes to make this something that is real beyond just mutual provision of comments into the process.
Yeah, that's helpful. Let me stay with you, because one of the interesting things I've noticed in the U.S. context, at least, is once the GHG protocol corporate accounting standard was put out, we're talking 20 years ago or so, governments would start to, that hadn't gone through some of that technical work yet, were looking for things to leverage off of for purposes of EPA reporting, Environmental Protection Agency reporting in the U.S. and other things. And you could start to see the GHG protocol becoming ensconced into, various regulations. And we see that in other contexts too. From ISO standard perspective, shouldn't say that standard, from ISO's perspective, how do you track all of the emerging regulatory developments while kind of maintaining independence? And are you, in the same way that you talk about organizations and governance and transparency and sort of like the process, Craig, that you were both alluding to, what's the nexus with the governments and the emergence? Because governments are fast and furiously trying to get their arms around, Article 6 and carbon market frameworks and disclosure and reporting and risk and all of these things. And so what's your sense of that, and what do you believe is ISO's role vis-a-vis governments?
So I think there's two things that I would say. So one is that when ISO standards are in the process of being revised, the national standards bodies around the world are asked to indicate whether or not that specific ISO standard is referenced in legislation within their country, so that we understand that and the impact of revisions that we make on legislation that's referencing the ISO standards. The second dimension that I would mention is that ISO standards are being referenced in one or two really key ways in legislation. So we often think about the ISO 14064 Part 1, which is the organizational accounting standard, and that's probably not the main way that our greenhouse gas accounting standards get referenced in legislation. It's through the validation and verification standard, the Part 3, and the 14065, which is about the competencies and the requirements of organizations that are performing the validation and verification requirements. So what we're seeing also happen is regulators who are concerned about regulatory efficiency, right? So our ISO standards, or same thing with the GHGP standards, and both get referenced in legislation. You sometimes see the concept of consider all of the greenhouse gases or the Kyoto greenhouse gases and do it from a life cycle perspective. But regulators are focused on the 90% of emissions that are coming from particular unit processes. So they will say, actually, we want these 1, 2, or 3 greenhouse gases. We don't want the whole slew of things. And we want it from specific process units. And we're seeing that with the CBAM regulations. We're seeing that with the output-based production regulations. But then they're using the validation and verification standards and that competency and the requirements for bodies performing the validation and verification to underpin the quality of their regulations and the reporting requirements. So for me, that's quite interesting that the validation and verification is oftentimes the standards that get referenced in legislation.
That's excellent. Can I the last thing you said was standards referenced in legislation. Did you mean that specifically as in law, or do you mean that more in regulations or guidance that's pursuant to a statutory provision?
So in law, so it may be, it's less so in acts, but regulations that are deriving their authority from acts. So it actually is regulatory requirements. They do also get referenced in soft law instruments, so guidelines that organizations set, but we do have countries that are actually embedding that validation and verification requirements in their regulations.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Okay, Alyssa. So your institute, GHG Management Institute, you focus a lot on capacity building and, as you alluded to, you know, how to go about doing it. What do you see as some of the challenges now in light of some of these macro level developments? Because once you set kind of a training manual or this is how you do it, you know, there's a very dynamic landscape. So talk to us a little bit about the work of capacity building that you do and how you see this influencing that.
Thank you. I think this is a very key and an amazing moment that we've all as professionals have been waiting for. I think anyone who's been struggling with the protocols, not understanding specific guidance, have been for years begging for opening of the protocol to get revision, to get some edits, to get some changes that are more actionable and implementable and actually more meaningful. So from our institute, we've been for years writing and publishing what rigor should look like in light of a potential future revision, and now we're here. And the most amazing thing that we see is that we're not starting from scratch anymore. When the protocol came out in 2004, GHTP, it was the first one out. They were doing an amazing work to get us to the space so we know what scope 1, 2, and 3 even mean. I remember not even 10 years ago, people didn't even know what there was in just natural conversations across the room, and now we have legislations in California calling for scope 1, 2, and 3. So the biggest challenge right now is making sure that all the experts who are working on inventories, who are working the technical working groups, are equipped with understanding of some of ways that the GHG protocol has not stepped up in many years in proper GHG accounting in some areas, and making sure that the technical working group is ready to go and put comments and engage and push for better and more rigorous accounting and less flexibility. I think for the longest time, GHTP has always been flexible because they were moving the mass of organizations to get here, and they accomplished this, and now we're here having those conversations. So to me, I see way more opportunities in this time, but very little time. So we don't have much time, and we have a process. So I really hope that we turn this challenge of all the folks who are learning, who are coming in new into the space, and get to know more of the key issues of GHG accounting, and come and comment. And have patience with the technical working groups too, as a member, and knowing I know GHG protocol is listening. They are taking notes. The working groups are being well run, and there will be public consultation. So we don't have much time, and I really hope everyone here with your peers engage, comment, send comments, so we can make sure that this next round, it might be for another 20 years that we have the same protocol for another 20 years, and we cannot get it wrong this time or have any things that do not lean or result in rigor, proper accounting for climate action. So I think, it's mostly opportunities, a little bit of a challenge, but at the Institute, it's teaching, build capacity. Here's free resources, and for you and the community and us continue to learn from the industry. To this day, I'm always learning with the industry folks who struggle with the ever-expanding Scope 3 issues, and no one knows everything, and the technical working group needs to hear from everyone, and including the advisory committee, the steering board at GHB. So
that's super interesting. So if you happen to be in the room with Craig Hansen on a panel talking about how to make sure we don't lock in 20 more years of something that isn't working right, what would you ask of Craig? Hypothetically.
Oh my God. Hi, Craig. as a member of the technical working group, I sit in the Scope 3, and I also sit at the SBTI and Net Zero for Scope 3. I think we are definitely at a place where the community of carbon professionals are ready to see the change, make the change, implement them, and not wait years again for more revisions. I think what we see a lot is the adaptability of new knowledge. You know, folks 3 years ago did not know what consequential accounting was, what allocational accounting was. And then those terms are coming up and people are picking up, people are addressing it. So I think the more we make the protocol adaptable to ever evolving space and climate, I think I'll speak for myself as a technical member, I think the whole community welcomes the evolving of protocols that follows the climate action that we want to see versus waiting, because it might cause a ripple effect in the market, which we're seeing it now, but I think it has been very well welcomed, and people are very passionate about getting it right and getting it correct. And if there is a mistake here and there this time, let's do it again in 2 years and we'll do it right. So
You're right that people are very passionate.
yes, myself
and
included.
You didn't even mention the Scope 2. So.
Oh, should we go there?
Not right now.
Next question.
Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
We're going to get to some other topics. I just thought it would be
Thank
good.
you.
Craig, is that good? I wanted to give you the opportunity.
No, it's good.
You're happy?
That's
okay.
great.
All right, cool. All right, Belinda, go to you. So, Toy2, you provide certification of disclosures both in New Zealand and internationally, right? So can you speak to the importance of third-party certification, third-party verification of some of these disclosures and reporting that's out there? Because not all of the standards have evolved. I mean, obviously, as we know, that require that third-party certification. And so I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So verification is really about driving the reliability of the information that's being disclosed, the integrity of the data, and errors can come in, right? People can make mistakes. Typically, especially in the voluntary market, people aren't going out there to make mistakes, but inconsistencies and errors can pop in. So having that independent verification process really can just mean that the company that's doing the disclosure can be confident in what they're saying, and any company or organisation or individual that might be making decisions based on that information can rely upon it. From the certification perspective, that's more about consistency. If an organisation's going, do I want to choose supplier A or supplier B based on their carbon intensity, it's not really helpful to them if one company's reported a Scope 1 and 2 inventory and another one's reported a full value chain. So our aim for our program is to have a consistent minimum set of emission sources that are reported. So it's Scope 1 and Scope 2 and a set of Scope 3, things like air travel and freight and waste, the things that most companies have. Companies can report more than that, but they will report that minimum boundary as well, so that then users can compare apples with apples.
Very good. Anyone else want to comment on the evolution of like self-certification or anything of that nature? And I'll get to you in just a sec. Yeah. No? Okay. Going forward, I mean, how, just to Craig and Zakaya, I mean, are you anticipating more third-party verified, certified inventory disclosures from constituents, reporters, corporates and others, or do you still see there being a lot of self-certification and so forth? Where do you see the role for third parties, and how prevalent is that going to be going forward? Maybe it will be required. Educate me on that.
So maybe I'll go first and then let Craig go. So I think as I mentioned, the validation and verification portion of the ISO greenhouse gas standards and the ISO 14065, which is on the requirements for bodies that are doing the validation and verification, those are being embedded in legislation, even where regulators are coming up with their own reporting requirements for greenhouse gases. We have another suite of standards that are getting released early in 2026 that have to do with validation and verification of sustainability information. So even if the sustainability information isn't coming from an ISO standard, being able to have that robust mechanism to validate and verify sustainability information or any other environmental information which the ISO standards give coverage to, I do think that there is a mechanism, I do think that there is a movement towards more of that type of underpinning of quality. And part of the reason I think that is there is because it eliminates a burden off of regulators who then have, if they're coming up with legislation or they're coming up with requirements, then they still need to make sure that there's compliance. And the way to make that easier for them is to use bodies that have been accredited by their national standards body with an international consistency, because that's what you get with the ISO system, so that they can trust the validation and verification that's being done, whether it's sustainability information, whether it's GHG information. So I think that there is this complement between regulatory objectives where regulators may want the actual control and the efficiency that comes with leveraging the validation and verification mechanisms from a third party that's accredited.
Great. Craig, did you want to say
Just one thing is, I can imagine an increase in the certification, verification, because of concern about liability, et cetera. Like look at the EU in truth claims, truth in advertising, greenwash, et cetera. Companies just want to protect themselves, and one surefire way to do it is to get the third-party verification for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, as regulation and scrutiny and importance of this information and how it's used and how people are making decisions based upon it. Yeah, that's good. Okay, good points there. To you have a mic. Okay, great. So Santiago Climate Exchange, you have market infrastructure, disclosure systems across Latin America. We've been talking a lot about international harmonization and internationalized standards, but can you speak a little bit about regional efforts like yours? And how they plug into this movement for global harmonization. And are there things that we need to be mindful of that are regional? And it's not maybe necessarily one size fits all. And that's where and I want to kind of move the conversation towards that and how we address uniqueness, place-based or sector-based, in the context of harmonization. But over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I think that the most important issue, that's the reality of LAC or Latin America is very different. In general, in the world, 70% of the emission is about the fossil fuel, and 23% is about the reality and other nature. But in LAC, the reality is different. 47%, the report of the World Bank, is about from the agriculture, land on the uses, and energy. So the solution that the region requests on a solution to climate or stay for the movement is different to the staff. So for us, it's very important to recognize this difference. So for example, the solutions based on the nature, for us, that was very important. The compensation is about from the natural or the conservation in ruralities like in Brazil is very different because the agriculture and using the land is the most important to the emissions of the way. So another point I think that is very important is the small size of the company, because in LAC the size of the company is small, but it's different small and medium like in Europe or USA. So the size is very different. So for us it's very important to integrate a standard or norm that considerate the flexibility or simplified for is important. In general, the reporting about scope 1 or scope 2, that's right, okay. But the challenge for the company is scope 3. So scope 3 is provided more little So it's need to up to this company with your reality of the new standard. So it's important flexibility and simplified because it's more complicated. The situation is only possible to the large companies apps, but the provider or value chain is not possible that do help in the or allow to the solution. Yeah.
Okay, so you just raised some really important things. So two things. One, there's a sector, so land,
Yeah.
nature, flag, and the complexity there. But that's one sector. There are all kinds of individualized sectors. And so, Craig and Zakia, from your your work that you're working on together, describe where your work ends and where then individualized specificity of sectoral specific additional requirements begin, and how those will be, I don't want to use the harmonized, it's the wrong word, but how are those things going to work together, and then maybe react to Veronica's comments about the importance of recognizing the difference regionally, the markets, the nature of where the emissions profile is and so forth, because I think that's a really interesting comment. If you two can react to that and just talk about where does your harmonization effort end in terms of the coverage at a sectoral level or regional?
I'll start. So you're correct. There are some sectoral specific ones, right? The land sector guidance is getting ready to come out pretty soon. So that deals with a certain sector then, right? Scope 2 is primarily about electricity, so you get that there. There are some special guidance on cement and others for specific like data sets, et cetera, right? But that's all a subset of the basics of what your Scope 1 kind of emissions categories, right? And even on Scope 3, I believe you know better than I, they have like these 17 categories or something like that where you get into, right? One point that you brought up was about the flexibility, right? And recognizing the size of companies, et cetera. And even if you look at what the ISB has approved that's out for public comment right now on Scope 2 revisions, there is a lot of flexibility given sizes of companies, right? In terms of whether or not you do the hourly matching, et cetera. There's a size threshold for the companies. And a lot of companies don't have to do some of these things because we recognize, to your point, a lot of companies don't have the staff to even do this kind of stuff, right? So we've been trying to build in that type of flexibility, but yet still meet what the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute has been talking about, is making sure we know now better, the technology is better. Let's actually now take that step forward to make it more rigorous so it actually does drive the climate change. It's a balance, right? Because some people can be pushed, keep it simple, high level, but there is a level of too much simplicity that then doesn't drive the change. And so, that's the tensions you feel when you're setting any standard.
Yeah, I think just building on what Craig said, so I think within the ISO world, we certainly do have, and it's really driven by countries saying that that they have a demand for a particular standard, and not just one country, but multiple countries that come together with a new work item proposal. So we do have ISO standards that have to do with combustion activities and greenhouse gas emissions from particular sectors, not all sectors, but specific sectors where the demand has come in. We also have, for example, a GHG standard specific to transport chain operations. So it really is driven by the demand that's coming from countries and from the market. But when those standards are developed, harmonization across the full ISO suite of standards is something that we give serious attention to. And in fact, when we were doing the GHG protocol and the ISO discussions about doing the harmonization, at one point we were actually just talking about one standard. And the discussion quickly went into the space of we can't just do one standard because the standards are all linked against each other, and the principles that are set up in part 1 or the organizational accounting, whatever we change in there is going to have knock-on effects on the project side or knock-on effects on the carbon footprint. So what you saw in the announcement that was released by ISO and Greenhouse Gas Protocol was a full suite of alignment across the full suite of standards, which I think is really important. So is there the focus on harmonization even across different industries and different elements of standards? Yes. The one thing that I would put as a qualification to that is because of that concept of regulatory efficiency, we do see regulators saying, actually, what we don't want is full coverage for this particular sector. We want a specific sector, whether it's the cement sector or whether it's the oil and gas sector. We want to focus on specific unit processes and the carbon footprint of those unit processes with 3 greenhouse gases and particular type of energy tracking. And so even though we've got the standards are the specific accounting standards may not be referenced in law because of that regulatory efficiency and the regulatory priority, which is why the validation and verification comes in. So we do have the standards. Whether or not they actually get picked up by regulators, I think it depends on what the regulatory objectives are.
Can I just clarify what I understood you to say, which is that there can be scenarios where a particular government wants to focus for its own reasons on a very specific element, and you're not saying that they then ask you to develop an ISO standard around that. You're saying they do still leverage the validation and verification processes, but then that becomes sort of an additional obligation on that particular entity beyond the ISO standard.
Yeah, that's right. And I think they do it. I think the reason why they're doing that is because the 90% of emissions are from particular unit processes, and to make sure that everybody is consistent and that everybody isn't focused on elements that may only comprise 10% of their emissions. They want to drive down those main emission sources as quickly as they can. That's why they focus on particular emission sources, but then underpin it with the validation and verification.
So can I come back to you? So from that perspective, in the training context and capacity building, I mean, how much of this is training governments to be mindful and aware of these developments that are happening to create kind of an internationalized but a consistency? And how much of it is training companies and others in the supply chain to respond to specific governmental requirements that may go beyond it? So I could see that being a kind of a dual mandate for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think from our perspective, it's really training the individual that can go, in 1 year, work at different places, work, at a company, work at a software company who is doing a software for reporting, or working at a company doing the inventory. So it's really important to go to the individual level and train to what does greenhouse gas accounting means. And it's not tied necessarily to a standard, because at the end of the day, emission sources are the same across the globe. So it's really a matter of kind of how you shape the pie for reporting. So from our side, definitely training from all backgrounds, but at the individual level, increasing the profession and institutionalize. I think it's 2025, and the GHG accounting profession is becoming an actual profession that people are going after. And at the Institute, we're launching a program for professional certification to help now continue to standardize the process and have professionals be equipped with the right knowledge, the right skills to do accounting and respond to any regulatory changes, understand what a regulatory mandate framework could mean to existing guidance. So for us, it's definitely the professional and the individual. And I do want to comment a little bit on the flexibility and cross-sector as a request or a beg for the standard setters in the room. I really think it's really important, because it's the 20 years of the GHGP where it's a cross-sectoral standard, and it's been, intentionally cross-sectoral, intentionally vague and open for interpretation. And as a plead from my side of capacity building is...
I opened the door, Craig. I apologize for that.
Craig, for you. For GHG and protocol and ISO as merged, to continue to provide guidance for future sector-specific at the Institute, to really believe in sector-specific inventories to specifically address what a sector issues and a sector emissions intensity activities are. And the more we expand the door of a cross-sectorial and don't give guidance to what a future sector-specific standard would look like. So for instance, let's say the e-commerce business, like they are a specific sector, how can GHG protocol and ISO continue to provide direct language on how a sector guidance would fit within the framework, so we can continue to have consistency, transparency, rigor, and less flexibility to the point where people don't know what they're responding to. So it's more a road to specificity to sectors, and less about do we do too much or do we do a little bit because there is flexibility around the world, or a direct magnitude of emissions profiles around the world.
I just want to build on one thing you said, Alyssa, earlier before that point, which was about, you were alluding to like the professionalization of GHG accounting, right, over the past 25 years. You know, a couple of years ago, I did a little speech on this whole thing, and it's very interesting, that little research that if you look at financial accounting, the first person that laid out kind of the concept of a financial ledger was like in 1400s. It took to the 1800s in Scotland before you actually had the first professional association of account, 400 years. And now, then you had the Great Depression, and then we got basically accounting the way it is today, right? That's a 500-year history. We're doing this in 25 years, right? And so I just want to, for all those, you probably are all part of the GHG accounting world, otherwise why would you be here, right? But I mean, we have to step back for a moment and just appreciate how fast and how far we've come on something as new as this, right? In 1995, this did not exist at all, right? So.
And many thanks to GHG Protocol and WRI for that. You guys brought it to the table, so thank you, yeah. Congratulations to every one of us who are in the profession and find a good fight.
Over to you, Alyssa.
Mic drop.
All right. So I want to pivot a little bit here, and if this is a topic that is, not something that you feel passionate about discussing, just feel free to say that. What I struggle with sometimes is this apparent competition or conflict between greenhouse gas, carbon credit methodologies and processes for accounting for project-based activities, and inventory accounting and GHG protocol-based reporting. And somehow, and I don't know exactly why, there seems to be almost like two camps. One that says, well, we should just be focusing on inventory reporting, and that's your path to decarbonization. And others that say, well, no, let's go in the markets. And now we're finally starting to see how those two things can actually work together, back to the harmonization piece. But I'd like to get your reflections, maybe across the board, maybe where you're certifying or where you're training or in your exchange. There's a use case for the data, for the information. We talked about decision useful information. Hopefully, there's a very short distance between a robust greenhouse gas methodology, carbon credit methodology that requires recording of information and reporting and verification and monitoring, and a disclosure for footprinting. Because if those two things are so divergent, then you are really talking apples and oranges, and then the way to get them to integrate becomes it's not just philosophical anymore, it becomes actually substantively different. So I'll start with you, Craig, if you don't mind. Can you speak to where that's going, and do you see there being more overlap, the Venn diagram kind of converging, so that corporates at the end of the day who have a challenge to figure out how to get there can have less complexity in that undertaking?
Yeah, so I think the issue you're hitting upon, let's just take with inventory accounting versus project. I mean, we're going to see that actually be clarified, and the fact we now have a new line, the actions and markets technical working group that's kicked off, or it's been going for some time, but it's now going on right now. And I think I step back and look at it this way: look, the broader thing is there's a number of things, and I'll stick with corporate accounting. There's a number of things a company can do to impact the climate. Some of that is within their value chain, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Some of it is outside of their value chain, and that's where the whole AMI thing comes up. one is not necessarily better than the other, right? They're different things because different things that a company can do that if calculated right actually do reflect reality, right? And so what we're trying to do with the protocol and now with ISO is make sure that we land clarity on the inventory methods on scopes 1, 2, and 3, and then on the consequential, which is more the AMI, right? And that's part of the debate that's going on right now. You see in the media around scope 2, which is some camp saying, well, some of the things there actually are outside of of a company's inventory, and that's the intellectual difference there. That doesn't mean it's not important. And part of the value, part of the purpose of the AMI process is, no, this stuff is really important, right? It is a means for companies to have a positive impact. And so I think there's, unfortunately, a view that the inventory stuff, 1, 2, 3, is all that really matters. Everything else is substantial. That's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of things the private sector can do outside the value chain that is real and drives down emissions, right? We need to capture that. Then here's where you asked this question about handing off. Here's where at least the GHG protocol has to then hand off. We can tell you what to measure, how to measure it, how to report it. You know, which column you put it in. It's the bodies like SBTI or it's the programs like the state of California. They'll say which of these count for our targets or our methods, right? Which ones can you add together or subtract from each other? That's not the role. A lot of people try to make it our role, but it's not our role. Our role is how do you count it? What can go together or not is a function of the target setting bodies. And I think we have this discussion a lot with folks that conflate that. But I think once you see that distinction, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's why working close to the SBTI makes a lot of sense, right?
That's really helpful, and I actually think just the way you articulated it, more people need to hear it just that way. And particularly the point that one's not necessarily better than the other, and there are ways to have positive impact within and beyond the value chain. And as long as they, as you said, as long as they are robustly measured, quantified, reported, and so forth, which, again, it should be very similar, you know. We're doing what we need to do collectively as a collective action problem. I want to come to you on this question. Do you have views on this? I mean, are you only in the disclosure, reporting camp, or are you also engaging in some of the crediting mechanisms?
Yeah, we do have programs that include offsetting, and we're extremely relieved that we've always had a really high bar for the credits that we accept. So we always were quite limited and had our criteria, not just any old credits. And a couple of years ago, we made the decision that we were transitioning to requiring use of ICVCM CCP tag credits because that seems to be where sort of the harmonization of carbon credit quality is going. So that, we do have that. There's been some challenges as the transition's been a bit slower than we anticipated, particularly in the New Zealand market. There are currently no projects, I don't think, that align with those, so which makes it quite tricky. So we've got some interim things in place there, but so that it's not instead of reducing, it's measure, reduce. Once you've shown that you've got reductions in place, then you can offset the rest. We've also got some really interesting conversations going on around removals within and potentially beyond value chains right now. So, tricky questions coming to us around, does this fit within the standard or not, and those sorts of things. An agricultural processing firm that talking to their bank who wants to be able to find a way to be able to finance the emissions reductions or removals with,
right.
Which is, it's within the value chain, but it's not the way it's normally done.
It's financed. So, they have their own net zero commitment, but they need to, that's how they do it.
So some really interesting conversations going on there too.
That's really interesting. I mean, can you just speak a little bit to what Veronica spoke to, and then I want to come back to you, Veronica, about the place, the uniqueness of the place, because I mean, New Zealand is such a magnificent and unique place in so many ways. You know, Flight of the Conchords, you know, being the most important of all. But no,
Not a Lord of the Rings person then.
not really. But talk to. I mean, did what Veronica say about the uniqueness of Latin America, does it resonate with you with respect to New Zealand because of the nature of the economy? And you just kind of alluded to it a little bit.
Yeah, it really does. Our inventory is a little bit weird in the context of more developed countries, in that 50% of New Zealand's emissions is agricultural. That's partly because our electricity sector has been largely decarbonised for decades. So we're currently sitting between 80 and 90% most years renewable energy, which has kind of created some really interesting conversations about market-based mechanisms, renewable energy certificates in the New Zealand context, because you'd need massive uptake of renewable energy certificates in order for it to be driving additional renewables, which is the purpose of them. So our government is not willing to accept renewable energy certificates for government departments that are doing their reporting, because they think it's not actually driving impact. It's kind of a way of greenwashing in some ways. So yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Well, if it's 90% renewables, like what would you be using the renewables energy certificates to achieve? Because you're already getting renewable electrons.
Yeah, it does reduce footprints a little bit, but so it's a bit
Just
of a...
on the margins.
Yeah, that's right.
I see. Interesting. Okay, thank you. Veronica, in terms of the exchange and the conversation about carbon credits and the methodologies for carbon credits and disclosure for corporate footprinting, do you have any thoughts on that? And I mean, do you see challenges between reporting and carbon credit generation standards, issuance, and so forth, and that nexus?
In Chile, 2 years ago, started the system de compensation, the Minister of the Environment. So this policy seek to promote the development of the activity in the country. So in this case, that for us is very important that the methodology for the standard like BERA, CDM, or another two there, ideally to reduce the emission and better the productivity, because 47% of the emission is in the agricultural or use of the land. And about for example, the energy or consumer electricity in specific, Chile, for example, is more than 70% of the energy renewable. So in Chile it uses a lot the EIC certificate on the attribute environmental. So it's not used for the discount, the emission in GID protocol. That is the most used the methodology in Chile and in the regions. Between the there are another program on Chile, Programa Huella Chile, is the government uses the ISO is 14046. I don't remember that. So for the next, either to you decide like a company, for the new steps is about the process aligned to the net zero. How it's very important to the company respond or have the back of your promise or your compromise at 2030. So in this moment is Jebel, this is weak, the pathway that's for it's very common, it's very used, the term carbon neutrality to 2070, but the pathway need to reduce methodology to consume the commitment. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, we have 5 minutes left. I just wanted to give you the opportunity, each of you, to, given the 20-year journey now, in the next 2 years from now, wherever that's going to be. I don't know. Not Australia. After Australia, where is it? European? Oh, Ethiopia. Oh, great. Oh, great. Addis. Oh, right. Okay, right. Thank you. So we're sitting here in Addis. If we're successful, if every one of you on this panel is successful in achieving your own goals for what you're doing, what are we going to say? What is the next challenge, or what will we have solved that we have not yet solved? Right?
Okay, magic wand. We are officially splitting greenhouse gas inventory with an action-based inventory. Companies have the opportunity to do credible and reputable and rigorous climate action and get measured and recognized for it, and no more room for questionable actions. And maybe the questions 2 years from now, a discussion is companies talking, what are you doing that I can do it as well? Because we don't want to be in bad waters anymore, and we want to get, do the proper action, and that's it.
That's great.
Our challenge, or the opportunity that we're trying to follow up over the next couple of years, is how we bring nature and adaptation into our programs, how we can get businesses thinking about that in the same way that they're currently thinking about carbon.
Excellent.
We think that is important, that advances in the capital natural recognize that's this as well.
Yeah, 2 years from now, a lot needs to happen, at least for us. We need to have released the land sector guidance, the updated corporate standard, the updated Scope 2, the updated Scope 3, the actions and markets instruments, and a new product standard or updated product standard, all of those with ISO. So if we succeed in that, you're going to get your harmonization, you're going to get your updates as well. So we're not going to sleep.
Yeah, good luck.
So everything Craig said, that's obviously the number one priority. Oh yeah, and I would include as well the project accounting standards. So that's the basis for carbon credits, is the 14,064 Part 2, as well as the GHGP project accounting standard. But I'm going to park the standards world and talk about it from a practitioner. One of the things that I worry the most about is not counting carbon, but the number of transformation, energy transition projects, decarbonization projects that I work on, and I come from an infrastructure background, where I see the projects getting shelved because of the cost overruns, because of the schedule delays. So for me, it's the realistic planning and the detailed thinking about what do we actually need to do to reduce our emissions, because in a lot of cases, to get the decarbonization, you need to make massive investments into infrastructure or new technology to switch from fossil fuels to electrification. So for me, I see that as an industry practitioner, that it's not the carbon counting side, but it's the effective execution of capital projects. And for me, that's my big worry, is seeing capital efficiency and those projects going well.
All right, thank you very much. This is a great panel. We're basically at time. I just wanted to close by saying that, I appreciate your last comment, Zakia, because what I'm a little remiss in not saying earlier was why. Why do we care about all of the details of carbon accounting? And the answer is because if it's reliable and trusted and then relied upon, it will be the basis for real change. It will be the basis upon which we can actually start to materially decarbonize and know it. And as part of that is rewarding those that do, financially and otherwise, through other mechanisms, and also putting some heat on those that aren't doing anything. I mean, we spend so much time, this is my last little diatribe, so much time focused on the companies that are doing what they think they're supposed to be doing, but it's really confusing and there's not a lot of clarity and it's complicated and they made a mistake, and not focusing on the vast majority of companies and emitters that aren't doing anything. And these people are literally getting sued, and these people are being left alone. So, with any luck, harmonization, infrastructure, the recognition of how it all fits together and then the use of it in a really aggressive manner is where in 2 years' time I'd love to see some success stories coming on the back end of all of this infrastructure, and that would be awesome. So to your point, thank you. Let's thank the panelists for what a great conversation.